Hello there, and welcome to Sleep Science, where curiosity grows quietly in the dark, much like tonight's mysterious subject. Whether you've had a busy day or simply love drifting off to the gentle hum of discovery, we're so glad you've chosen to spend this time with us. Tonight, we're wandering into one of nature's most ancient and quietly extraordinary kingdoms, fungi. They're neither plant nor animal, but something wonderfully in between. They live beneath our feet, inside our bread, and throughout the forests in ways that would astonish you. They can glow in the dark, communicate across miles, and some have been alive for thousands of years, patiently weaving the world together in ways we're only just beginning to understand. Before we begin our gentle journey through this hidden realm, feel free to share where in the world you're listening from and what time it is. It's always lovely to know where these quiet science stories are floating off to. If you were to ask most people what a mushroom is, they might say it's a plant. A strange plant, perhaps. One that doesn't need sunlight and pops up in the most curious places. But a plant, nonetheless. And if you gently corrected them, suggesting maybe it's closer to an animal, they'd probably give you the sort of look reserved for people who claim the moon is made of cheese. But here's the wonderful truth. Fungi are neither plant nor animal. They're something altogether different. Something that has been quietly living its own mysterious life for over 1 billion years, long before either plants or animals figured out how to exist. Let's take a gentle step back and imagine, if you will, the great tree of life. Picture it not as a simple family tree, but as an ancient, sprawling oak with countless branches reaching in all directions. On one major branch, you'd find all the animals, the whales and butterflies, the elephants and earthworms, all of us breathing, moving, eating other living things to survive. On another substantial branch live the plants, the roses and redwoods, the grass and algae, all of them catching sunlight and turning it into food through the quiet magic of photosynthesis. But there's a third branch, just as ancient and important, that most people never really notice. It's the kingdom of fungi, and it branched off from our shared family tree so long ago that fungi are, in many ways, as different from plants as they are from animals. In fact, if you had to choose, fungi are actually more closely related to you than they are to a daisy or an oak tree. Take a moment with that thought. There's something both peaceful and remarkable about sharing such an ancient kinship with the mushrooms growing quietly in the forest. So what exactly makes a fungus a fungus? Let's wander through their most extraordinary characteristics, the ones that make them unlike anything else alive. First, there's the matter of how they eat. Plants, as you know, make their own food from sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water. They're the universe's gardeners, quietly photosynthesizing in the gentle warmth of the sun. Animals, on the other hand, must find their food. We hunt, gather, graze, or in the case of humans, occasionally argue over pizza toppings. Fungi do something wonderfully different. They are nature's recyclers, the gentle decomposers who digest their food externally. Imagine, if you will, eating your dinner not by bringing it to your mouth, but by releasing digestive juices onto your plate and absorbing the nutrients directly through your skin. It sounds rather science fiction, but that's precisely what fungi do. They secrete powerful enzymes into their surroundings, into dead wood, fallen leaves, or rich soil. And these enzymes break down complex organic matter into simple nutrients that the fungus can absorb. It's like having a stomach that extends far beyond your body, dissolving and digesting the world around you. This external digestion gives fungi their unique role as nature's ultimate recyclers. While this might sound a bit clinical, there's something deeply poetic about it. Every fallen tree, every dropped leaf, every creature that has completed its earthly journey becomes food for fungi. And in breaking down these remains, fungi release nutrients back into the soil, feeding new life. They are the quiet gardeners of death and renewal, ensuring that nothing is ever truly wasted. Now, here's something curious about fungal bodies. What we typically call a mushroom, that familiar umbrella-shaped thing you might find in your yard after rain, is really just the fruit of the fungus, much like an apple is the fruit of an apple tree. The real body of the fungus, called the mycelium, lives hidden underground or within rotting wood, spreading out in delicate, thread-like networks called hyphae. These threads are so fine they're nearly invisible to the naked eye, yet they can stretch for miles, quietly connecting trees, plants, and soil in an underground web of extraordinary complexity. Picture these hyphal networks as nature's internet, a living, breathing worldwide web made not of cables and signals, but of living tissue that can transport nutrients, water, and even information across vast distances. Some mycelia are among the largest living organisms on Earth. We'll explore those gentle giants later in our journey. But for now, just imagine that beneath every step you take, there might be ancient fungal networks older than human civilization, quietly doing their work in the darkness below. There's something peaceful about fungi's approach to existence. They don't rush toward the light like plants reaching for the sun, nor do they dart about seeking their next meal like many animals. Instead, they spread slowly, patiently, methodically, growing through their environment rather than merely living on top of it. They are masters of quiet persistence, of gentle but inexorable expansion. A fungus might take decades to fully colonize a fallen log, but when it's finished, that log will have been transformed into rich soil, ready to nourish new life. Fungi also reproduce in ways that seem almost magical. They can spread through spores so tiny and numerous that a single mushroom might release billions of them into the air. These microscopic seeds drift on the wind like fairy dust, capable of traveling vast distances to start new colonies wherever conditions are right. Some fungi can also reproduce by simply fragmenting. A piece of mycelium breaking off can grow into an entirely new individual, like a living puzzle that creates new puzzles from its own pieces. But perhaps most wonderfully, fungi challenge our very categories of what it means to be alive. Some fungi appear to make decisions, to problem solve, to communicate. They can sense changes in their environment and respond accordingly, all without a brain or nervous system as we understand them. They can form partnerships with plants that benefit both species, trade nutrients across their networks, and even warn neighboring organisms of threats. They exist in a space between the individual and the collective, between simple and complex, between plant-like and animal-like, in a way that gently reminds us that life is far more creative and mysterious than our tidy categories might suggest. As we settle deeper into our exploration of these remarkable beings, take a moment to appreciate just how quietly revolutionary fungi are. They've been decomposing, communicating, and connecting the world for longer than nearly any other complex life forms. They've survived mass extinctions, adapted to every environment on Earth, and continue to surprise scientists with new abilities and partnerships we never knew existed. There's something wonderfully humbling about this hidden kingdom. For most of human history, we barely noticed them, except when they fruited into mushrooms or when they turned our bread moldy. But now, as we begin to understand their true nature, we're discovering that fungi may be among the most important and sophisticated life forms on our planet. Quiet architects of the living world, working always just beneath our notice. And so, having met fungi in all their mysterious glory, let's take a gentle wander backward through time to see how these remarkable beings first came to be and how they helped shape the very world we call home. Long before there were forests to walk through or flowers to smell, long before dinosaurs thundered across continents or even humble mosses crept onto shore, there were fungi. Picture Earth as it was over 1 billion years ago, a blue marble floating in space, its lands utterly barren, nothing but rock and sand and the occasional volcano painting the sky with ash. The only life clung to the edges of ancient seas, simple and small, invisible to any eye that might have gazed upon those empty shores. Yet even then, in the quiet depths of those primordial waters, fungi were already ancient. The story of fungi is, in many ways, the secret story of how life learned to live on land. For most of Earth's history, the continents were sterile places. Life had flourished in the oceans for billions of years, but the land remained empty, a vast expanse of bare rock under an alien sky. The challenge was immense. How do you survive without the protective embrace of water, without the gentle buoyancy that makes movement easy, without the dissolved nutrients that ocean currents deliver right to your doorstep? The first brave souls to attempt this transition were probably algae, simple plant-like organisms that began creeping into shallow pools and tidal zones around 500 million years ago. But here's where the story gets beautifully complicated. They didn't make this journey alone. Fossil evidence suggests that some of the earliest land plants lived in intimate partnership with fungi, a relationship so ancient and fundamental that it may have been the key to life's conquest of land itself. Let's imagine, if you will, one of these pioneering partnerships. Picture a tiny, primitive plant, not much more than a green smudge clinging to wet rocks near an ancient shoreline. It has no roots as we know them, no elaborate vascular system to transport water and nutrients. It's trying to make a living in this harsh new environment, but the soil, if you can call the thin layer of weathered rock and organic debris soil, contains few of the nutrients it needs. Enter the fungus, a network of delicate threads that can probe deep into cracks in the rock, dissolving minerals with patient chemistry, extending far beyond where the little plant's simple body can reach. This partnership, called a mycorrhizal relationship, was likely one of the most important alliances in the history of life. The fungus, with its powerful enzymes and extensive network, could break down rock and organic matter, accessing phosphorus, nitrogen, and other essential nutrients. In return, the plant, with its newfound ability to capture sunlight, could share some of the sugars it made through photosynthesis. It was nature's first trade agreement. Sunlight made food in exchange for mineral wealth, both partners stronger together than either could be alone. The fossil record offers us tantalizing glimpses of these ancient collaborations. In rocks dating back 400 million years, paleontologists have found perfectly preserved fungal structures inside the tissues of early land plants. These aren't accidental contaminations or signs of disease. They're the fossilized remains of partnerships that help transform our planet. Some of these ancient fungi look remarkably similar to species that form mycorrhizal relationships today, suggesting that this collaborative approach to life has been refined and perfected over hundreds of millions of years. But fungi weren't just helpful partners in this great terrestrial adventure. They were also pioneers in their own right. Some of the earliest evidence of life on land comes not from plants, but from fungi themselves. Spores and fungal structures have been found in rocks that predate the earliest confirmed land plants by tens of millions of years. This suggests that fungi may have been among the very first complex organisms to establish themselves on the continents, quietly preparing the way for everything that followed. There's something wonderfully patient about this early fungal colonization. These ancient fungi likely lived much as many fungi do today, breaking down whatever organic matter they could find, slowly weathering rock, gradually building up the thin soils that would eventually support more complex ecosystems. They were the original terraformers, transforming sterile landscapes into places where life could flourish. And they did this work not in years or decades, but across geological ages, their network spreading slowly but inexorably across the continents. As plants became more sophisticated, developing proper roots, vascular systems, and eventually seeds, their partnerships with fungi became more intricate as well. The fossil record shows increasingly complex fungal networks associated with early forests. By the time the first trees appeared, around 350 million years ago, they were already deeply entwined with fungal partners. In fact, it's quite possible that without fungi, there would be no forests at all. The nutrient-poor soils of early land environments might never have been able to support large plants without their fungal allies to help them access the minerals locked away in rock. One of the most fascinating chapters in this ancient story involves the Devonian period, often called the Age of Fishes, but equally important as the time when terrestrial ecosystems really began to take shape. During this period, around 400 million years ago, the first true forests spread across the land. These weren't the familiar forests of oak and pine we know today, but strange woods of primitive trees with no leaves, their branches ending in clusters of spore-bearing structures. And beneath these alien forests, fungal networks were already weaving the complex underground webs that would become one of the most important features of terrestrial life. Some scientists believe that these early fungal networks were even more crucial to forest ecosystems than they are today. In the nutrient-poor environments of early Earth, the ability of fungi to transport minerals and water between plants may have been the difference between thriving forest communities and barren landscapes. The fungi served as a living infrastructure, connecting individual plants into collaborative networks that could share resources and information across vast distances. There's also evidence that ancient fungi were involved in one of the most dramatic events in Earth's history, the transformation of the atmosphere. As land plants spread and flourished, supported by their fungal partners, they began pulling enormous amounts of carbon dioxide from the air through photosynthesis. Much of this carbon was locked away in the woody tissues of early trees, and when these trees died, fungi played a crucial role in determining what happened next. In some cases, fungal decomposition returned the carbon to the atmosphere, but in others, particularly in the swampy environments that were common during this period, dead plant material was buried faster than fungi could break it down, eventually forming the coal deposits that powered human civilization millions of years later. The ancient fungi were also innovators in their own right, developing many of the strategies that make modern fungi so successful. They evolved complex spore-producing structures, sophisticated chemical signaling systems, and the ability to form partnerships, not just with plants, but with each other. Some early fungi may have been among the first organisms to develop what we now recognize as social behaviors, coordinating their growth and reproduction across their networks in ways that suggest a primitive form of collective intelligence. As we drift through these ancient stories, there's something deeply comforting about the persistence of these fungal partnerships. The mycorrhizal relationships that helped the first plants colonize land are still happening today, in forests and gardens around the world. The fundamental collaboration between fungi and plants, trading nutrients for sugars, sharing resources across networks, building soil and supporting ecosystems, continues much as it did hundreds of millions of years ago. In your own garden, ancient agreements are still being honored. Partnerships as old as land life itself, still quietly sustaining the green world around us. And so, from those first tentative steps onto barren shores, to the complex forest ecosystems that followed, fungi have been there, patient partners and pioneering colonists, helping to weave the web of relationships that connects all terrestrial life. Their ancient networks laid the foundation for the secret communications we're only now beginning to understand. There's something quietly astonishing happening beneath your feet right now. As you rest there, perhaps thinking about the day that's passed, or letting your mind wander toward sleep, an entire internet of life is humming just below the surface. It's a network more vast and intricate than anything humans have built, more ancient than our oldest cities, and more collaborative than our finest social systems. Scientists call it the mycorrhizal network, but you might know it by its more poetic name, the Wood Wide Web. Let's take a gentle step into a forest. Any forest will do. Picture yourself walking along a quiet woodland path, sunlight filtering through the canopy above, the soft crunch of leaves beneath your feet. What you're seeing, the towering trees, the delicate ferns, the colorful wildflowers, is beautiful, certainly, but it's also just the tip of an enormous iceberg. For every tree you can see, there's a vast hidden world below ground, where fungal threads connect not just roots to soil, but tree to tree, plant to plant, sometimes across distances that would astonish you. These connections aren't accidental. They're purposeful, sophisticated partnerships that have been refined over millions of years. The threads that make up this network, those delicate fungal filaments called hyphae, form intimate relationships with plant roots, wrapping around them and sometimes even growing inside them. It's a relationship so close that the line between where the fungus ends and the plant begins becomes beautifully blurred. Here's where it gets interesting, and perhaps a little magical. Through these fungal networks, trees can share resources with one another. A large ancient oak tree with its deep roots and broad canopy might send nutrients to a small sapling struggling in its shadow. A dying tree might pass along its accumulated resources to its neighbors before it falls. Mother trees, as some scientists call them, can even recognize their own offspring and send them preferential care through the network. It's as if the forest has developed its own social security system, one built on mutual aid and quiet generosity. But the networks don't just move nutrients, they carry information. When a tree is attacked by insects, it can send chemical warnings through the fungal web, alerting its neighbors to begin producing defensive compounds. Imagine that, a tree under siege, calling out through invisible channels for its community to prepare. The attacked tree releases certain chemicals into the fungal network, and other trees, receiving this molecular message, start producing bitter compounds that make them less appealing to the approaching pests. It's an early warning system that would make any emergency coordinator proud. The scientist who helped us understand this hidden communication network is a woman named Suzanne Simard, whose research has revealed just how social trees really are. In her experiments in the forests of British Columbia, she found that paper birch and Douglas fir trees, species that many believed competed with each other, actually form cooperative partnerships through mycorrhizal networks. The birch trees, which photosynthesize well in full sunlight, send carbon to the fir seedlings growing in the shade below. Later, as the firs grow taller and the birches become shaded, the flow reverses, with the firs supporting their former benefactors. It's a level of reciprocity and long-term thinking that seems almost human in its sophistication, except that it's happening without brains, without planning committees, without any of the apparatus we think necessary for complex social behavior. The network operates on chemistry and patience, on signals that flow at the speed of molecular diffusion rather than electrical impulses. It's socialism at the cellular level, and it's been quietly running the world's forests for longer than humans have existed. These fungal networks are also remarkably resilient. If one pathway is damaged, perhaps by drought, disease, or a fallen tree, the network can often root around the problem, finding alternative connections to keep the community connected. Some mycorrhizal networks are thought to be thousands of years old, persisting through fires, storms, and countless generations of trees. The fungal partners that connected trees in medieval forests may still be linking trees today, an underground continuity that spans human civilizations. The scale of these networks can be breathtaking. In some forests, a single fungal individual might connect hundreds of trees across dozens of acres. The largest known fungal network, discovered in Oregon, spans over 2,000 acres and may be thousands of years old. Imagine, beneath what appears to be a collection of individual trees lies a single living entity, older than human history, quietly orchestrating the forest's social life. But fungi aren't just passive middlemen in these relationships. They're active participants with their own needs and preferences. Different fungal species partner with different types of plants, and some fungi are remarkably picky about their companions. The fungi that partner with orchids, for instance, are often so specialized that each orchid species has its own particular fungal ally. Without the right fungal partner, many orchid seeds simply cannot germinate. It's a reminder that what looks like a single plant is actually a collaboration, a partnership so essential that neither partner can survive without the other. The economics of these relationships are fascinatingly complex. Plants provide fungi with carbohydrates made through photosynthesis, essentially sunlight converted into sugar. In return, fungi provide plants with nutrients they've extracted from soil and rock, particularly phosphorus and nitrogen, which are often in short supply. But the exchange rates aren't fixed. Fungi can adjust their services based on supply and demand. providing more nutrients to plants that offer more carbon, or withholding services from partners that aren't pulling their weight. It's a market economy operating at the molecular level, complete with trading, negotiation, and even what economists might recognize as futures contracts. Some trees seem to specialize in being network hubs, highly connected individuals that help facilitate communication across the forest. These hub trees are often the oldest and largest in the forest. Their extensive root systems and mature fungal partnerships making them ideal conduits for forest-wide communication. When these hub trees die or are removed, the network's efficiency can decline dramatically, sometimes triggering cascading effects throughout the forest community. Recent research has revealed even more sophisticated behaviors in these networks. Some fungi appear to be able to store information, learning from past experiences and adjusting their growth patterns accordingly. Others can make what look remarkably like decisions, choosing between different pathways or partners based on changing conditions. It's as if the network has a kind of distributed intelligence, a forest mind that emerges from millions of simple interactions. And here's something that might help you drift towards sleep. This vast, ancient network operates largely in darkness, in the quiet spaces between soil particles, at a pace that makes a chess match look hurried. While we rush through our days above ground, the wood wide web carries on its patient work below, trading molecules and messages at a rhythm that follows seasons rather than seconds, years rather than heartbeats. There's something deeply peaceful about knowing that this hidden world exists, that beneath the apparent competition and struggle of the visible forest lies a foundation of cooperation and mutual support. As you settle into rest, imagine that quiet network humming below, connecting, sharing, sustaining the living world with an ancient wisdom that asks nothing more than to continue the patient work of growing life together. Now here's something wonderful about the fungal world that might seem a little grim at first, but reveals itself to be surprisingly beautiful. Fungi are the universe's most patient and thorough housekeepers. While we've been marveling at their networks and partnerships, they've been quietly doing perhaps the most essential job on Earth, cleaning up after life itself. Every fallen leaf, every toppled tree, every creature that has completed its earthly journey becomes, in time, food for fungi. And in this gentle process of decomposition, fungi don't just tidy up, they transform death into the very building blocks of new life. Let's take a nice slow wander into this process, because there's poetry in decomposition when you understand what's really happening. Imagine autumn in a deciduous forest, that magical time when trees release their summer's work in a cascade of gold and crimson. Millions of leaves drift down, carpeting the forest floor in what looks like nature's most extravagant confetti celebration. But what happens next is where fungi truly shine. Those fallen leaves, beautiful as they are, represent an enormous challenge for the forest. They're packed with complex molecules, cellulose, lignin, proteins, and other organic compounds that took the trees months to assemble using sunlight and soil nutrients. Without some way to break these molecules back down, the forest floor would simply accumulate layers upon layers of dead material, locking away nutrients that new plants desperately need. The forest would eventually suffocate under its own success. Enter the fungi, nature's molecular magicians. Unlike animals, which must bring food inside their bodies to digest it, fungi practice what scientists call external digestion. They secrete powerful enzymes directly into their surroundings, like tiny chemical factories releasing their products into the world. These enzymes are remarkably sophisticated, each one designed to break specific molecular bonds. Some specialize in cellulose, the tough structural material that gives plants their strength. Others tackle lignin, the incredibly stubborn compound that makes wood woody. Still others work on proteins, fats, and the countless other molecules that make up living things. There's something quietly astonishing about watching this process unfold, if you have the patience for it. A fallen log doesn't simply disappear overnight. It undergoes a slow, graceful transformation that can take decades. First, tiny fungal spores settle on the bark, germinating in the moist crevices where water collects. The emerging hyphae probe gently into the wood, following the grain, seeking out the nutrients locked within. Different fungi arrive in waves, each specialized for different stages of decay. The pioneer species often work on the surface layers, breaking down the easier-to-digest compounds. Then come the specialists, fungi with enzymes capable of tackling the tough structural materials that give wood its strength. Some fungi, called white rot fungi, can even break down lignin completely, leaving behind wood that's pale and spongy. Others, the brown rot fungi, digest the cellulose but leave the lignin behind, creating wood that crumbles like chocolate cake when touched. As the months and years pass, the log slowly transforms. What was once a solid barrier becomes a nursery for new life. Seeds germinate in the soft, nutrient-rich material. Insects and other small creatures make their homes in the decaying wood. The log becomes less like dead matter and more like a slow-release fertilizer, gradually returning its stored nutrients to the forest community. Eventually, nothing remains but rich soil, indistinguishable from the earth around it, ready to support new generations of trees. This process of decomposition is happening everywhere, all the time, mostly invisible to our hurried eyes. The morning's fallen leaves are already being colonized by fungal spores before evening comes. That bird that didn't make it through the winter is being gently recycled by soil fungi, its molecules destined to become part of new life. Even the grass clippings in your compost bin are experiencing this quiet transformation, as fungi work their molecular magic on everything from coffee grounds to autumn raking. But fungi don't just decompose randomly. They're remarkably selective about what they choose to break down and when. Some fungi specialize in fresh material, diving into newly fallen leaves with enthusiasm. Others prefer their organic matter well-aged, like connoisseurs of fine wine. Some fungi only appear when specific conditions are met: the right temperature, the perfect moisture level, the exact chemical environment they require for their specialized work. There's also beautiful timing to fungal decomposition. In many ecosystems, fungi seem to coordinate their activities with the seasons and the needs of the plant community. They might accelerate decomposition in spring when plants need nutrients for new growth, and slow it down in winter when biological activity decreases. It's as if they're reading the forest's rhythms and adjusting their work accordingly. The diversity of decomposer fungi is staggering. Scientists have identified thousands of species, each with its own preferences and specialties. Some love rotting fruit, others prefer animal matter. Still others specialize in the most difficult materials like feathers, hair, and horn. There are fungi that can break down petroleum products, others that can digest plastic, and some that can even handle radioactive materials. They're nature's ultimate recycling specialists, with a tool for every job. One of the most remarkable aspects of fungal decomposition is how complete it can be. Unlike fire, which releases most nutrients immediately as smoke and ash, fungal decomposition is a slow, controlled process that captures and retains nutrients in forms that plants can use. The fungi essentially act as nutrient banks, holding on to valuable elements like nitrogen and phosphorus until plants need them, then releasing them gradually through their networks. There's also something wonderfully democratic about decomposition. Fungi don't care whether they're working on the mightiest oak or the humblest weed, the most exotic flower or the most common grass. Everything receives the same patient attention, the same thorough recycling. In the fungal world, death is not an ending, but a transformation, a return to the great pool of molecules that life continuously borrows and returns. And here's perhaps the most beautiful part. Without this constant quiet work of decomposition, life as we know it couldn't exist. The carbon in your body, the nitrogen in your DNA, the phosphorus in your bones, all of these elements have been recycled countless times by fungi. You are, in a very real sense, made from the patient work of decomposers, assembled from molecules that have lived many lives before becoming part of you. As we drift deeper into the world of fungi, there's comfort in knowing that nothing is ever truly lost, only transformed. The leaves that fall, the creatures that pass, the wood that ages, all of it becomes part of the great cycle of matter and energy that sustains the living world. And presiding over this endless transformation are the fungi, patient as rain, thorough as time, ensuring that every ending becomes a new beginning. Now, here's something curious about our relationship with fungi. For most of human history, we thought mushrooms were the fungi. It's an understandable mistake, really. Mushrooms are what we see, what we can touch and pick, and occasionally eat. They appear seemingly overnight, like little umbrellas sprouting from the earth after rain, and then often disappear just as quickly. But calling a mushroom the fungus is a bit like calling an apple the apple tree. You're seeing only the most visible part of a much larger hidden story. Let's take a gentle step into this mystery. That mushroom you spotted on your last woodland walk, standing there looking so perfectly formed and self-contained, is actually just the fruiting body of an enormous organism that extends far beyond what your eyes can see. Think of it as nature's equivalent of a flower, but instead of producing seeds, it produces spores, microscopic packages of potential that drift away on the wind to start new fungal colonies wherever they land. The real fungus, as we've discovered, is the mycelium, that vast network of threads spreading through soil, wood, or whatever substrate the organism calls home. The mycelium might extend for miles underground, connecting trees and plants in its web, quietly decomposing organic matter, trading nutrients with its plant partners. It could be decades or even centuries old, this hidden network, ancient and patient and largely invisible. And then, when conditions are just right, it does something quite magical. It fruits. Imagine, if you will, the coordination required for this process. Scattered throughout the soil, threads of mycelium that might be separated by hundreds of yards somehow communicate and coordinate to produce mushrooms that emerge simultaneously across the forest floor. It's like a vast underground city suddenly deciding to build monuments, with construction crews spread across the landscape all working from the same blueprint, timing their work to the same mysterious schedule. The triggers for fruiting are wonderfully specific. Most fungi wait for just the right combination of temperature, moisture, daylight, and sometimes even atmospheric pressure. This is why mushrooms seem to appear overnight after a warm rain. The mycelium has been there all along, waiting patiently for its moment. When the conditions align, it can mobilize enormous resources remarkably quickly, sometimes producing mushrooms that weigh more than the visible fungal biomass that created them. It's like watching a magic trick performed by the earth itself. And what a diversity of magic tricks fungi have developed. If you've only ever seen the classic toadstool mushrooms in fairy tale illustrations, you're in for a wonderful surprise. Fungi have evolved an astonishing array of fruiting strategies, each one elegant in its own way. There are shelf fungi that grow like woody brackets from the sides of trees, looking like natural staircases for forest fairies. There are coral fungi that branch and divide like underwater gardens, and bird's nest fungi that create tiny cups filled with what look like microscopic eggs. Some fungi produce puffballs, perfect spheres that can range from marble size to larger than basketballs. When mature, these puffballs develop a small opening at the top, and any disturbance, a drop of rain, a passing animal, your gentle touch, causes them to release clouds of spores like biological smoke bombs. It's estimated that a large puffball can contain trillions of spores, each one capable of starting a new fungal colony if it lands in suitable conditions. Then there are the stinkhorns, fungi that have evolved one of nature's more dramatic spore dispersal strategies. These peculiar fungi produce fruiting bodies that smell remarkably like rotting meat, attracting flies and other insects that might otherwise ignore them. The insects, thinking they found a feast, land on the mushroom and inadvertently pick up spores on their feet and bodies. When they fly away, disappointed but still carrying their microscopic passengers, they help spread the fungus to new locations. It's a brilliant bit of chemical trickery, though perhaps not something you'd want to encounter on a peaceful nature walk. Other fungi have partnered with the wind for spore dispersal, developing fruiting bodies that act like biological catapults or bellows. Some mushrooms have gills arranged so precisely that they create tiny air currents as moisture evaporates, helping to carry spores away from the parent. Others produce fruiting bodies that twist and turn as they dry, literally flinging their spores into the air through mechanical action. The mathematics of spore production are quietly astonishing. A single mushroom might release billions of spores over the course of its brief life, and a large fungal colony might produce trillions. Most of these spores will never find suitable conditions to germinate. They might land on concrete, or in water, or in soil that's already occupied by other fungi. But fungi play a numbers game, producing so many spores that even if only a tiny fraction succeed, the species survives and spreads. There's something almost dreamlike about the scale of this invisible rain of spores. Every breath you take likely contains fungal spores from dozens of different species. They're drifting through the air around you right now, these microscopic capsules of potential life, some of them having traveled thousands of miles on air currents, others having just been released from mushrooms in your own backyard. It's a gentle reminder that we live in a world suffused with life, even in forms we can't see. But not all fungi are in a hurry to fruit. Some species produce mushrooms only every few years, waiting for perfect conditions that might not align for a decade or more. Others seem to fruit on schedules that mystify even experienced mycologists, appearing unpredictably and then vanishing for years. And some fungi, particularly those that live in very stable environments or have very specialized partnerships, might rarely produce visible fruiting bodies at all, conducting their entire life cycles in the hidden realm below ground. This is one reason why the diversity of fungi is almost certainly vastly underestimated. Scientists can only study and catalogue the species they can see and collect, but the vast majority of fungal life remains hidden in soil and wood, fruiting rarely or never under conditions that humans can observe. There might be entire kingdoms of fungi that we've never encountered, ancient lineages that have been quietly going about their business in the depths of forests or the dark corners of cave systems, patient as stone, old as the hills themselves. There's also a seasonal poetry to mushroom fruiting that speaks to something deep in the human psyche. Spring mushrooms, like morels, seem to capture the energy of renewal and growth. Summer fungi often appear bold and colourful, matching the season's exuberance. But it's autumn that truly belongs to the mushrooms, when the combination of warmth, moisture, and abundant organic matter creates perfect conditions for fruiting. Walking through a fall forest, you might encounter dozens of different mushroom species, each one a small miracle of timing and biology. Each one representing a vast, hidden network celebrating the season in its own quiet way. And as you settle into rest tonight, perhaps you'll carry with you the image of this invisible abundance. Countless fungal networks spread beneath the sleeping earth, some preparing for their moment of fruiting, others patiently extending their reach, all of them connected in the great web of decomposition and renewal that keeps the world turning. In the darkness below, ancient organisms tend their gardens of decay and growth, ensuring that tomorrow's forests will rise from today's fallen leaves. There's something wonderfully mysterious about intelligence without a brain, about communication without words, about decision-making without what we typically think of as a mind. And yet, as scientists peer deeper into the world of fungi, they're discovering that these seemingly simple organisms are capable of behaviors that look remarkably like thinking, communicating, and even learning. It's a reminder that consciousness might be far more diverse and distributed than we've ever imagined, flowing through forms of life that operate on principles we're only beginning to understand. Let's wander into this mystery gently, because fungal communication happens at a pace that makes human conversation seem frantically hurried. Imagine the mycelial network we've been exploring, those delicate threads spreading through soil and wood, connecting plants and decomposing organic matter. Now picture this network not just as a passive conduit for nutrients, but as a living communication system, constantly sensing its environment, processing information, and making decisions about where to grow, what to connect with, and how to respond to threats and opportunities. The first thing to understand about fungal communication is that it's primarily chemical. Fungi speak in molecules, releasing and detecting a vast vocabulary of chemical signals that convey information about everything from food sources to mating opportunities to environmental dangers. These chemical messages can travel through the network itself, carried along the fungal threads like letters in a pneumatic tube system. Or they can diffuse through soil and air to reach distant parts of the network or even other organisms entirely. Some of these chemical signals are remarkably specific. When a fungus encounters a potential food source, it might release enzymes to begin breaking down the organic matter, but it also releases signaling molecules that essentially say, "food here," to other parts of the network. This can trigger a coordinated response, with the fungal threads from across the network beginning to grow toward the newly discovered resource. It's like a cellular version of phoning for backup, except the message is carried by molecules drifting through soil, rather than electrical signals through wires. But fungi don't just send chemical messages, they also receive and interpret them. Fungal networks can detect an astonishing array of chemical cues from their environment. They can sense the presence of plant roots, identifying not just that a root is nearby, but often what species of plant it belongs to, and whether it might be a suitable partner for a mycorrhizal relationship. They can detect the chemical signatures of other fungi, helping them distinguish between allies, competitors, and potential mates. They can even sense seasonal changes, responding to shifts in temperature and day length with remarkable precision. Even more intriguing is the growing evidence that fungi can communicate using electrical signals, much like the nervous systems of animals. Researchers have detected patterns of electrical activity flowing through mycorrhizal networks, pulses and waves that seem to carry information across the fungal threads. When one part of a network encounters stress, perhaps drought, disease, or physical damage, electrical signals can rapidly alert distant parts of the network, triggering coordinated responses that might help the organism survive the challenge. These electrical signals move much faster than chemical ones, allowing for what appears to be real-time communication across the network. A tree under attack by insects might send chemical distress signals through its fungal partners, but those signals could take hours or days to reach distant parts of the network. Electrical signals, on the other hand, can travel the length of a fungal network in minutes, enabling rapid responses to urgent situations. What's particularly fascinating is that these signals aren't random noise. They show patterns that suggest meaningful information transfer. Some researchers have detected what look like different types of electrical words in fungal networks, distinct signal patterns that seem to correspond to different types of environmental conditions or network states. It's as if the mycelium has developed its own electrical language, a way of coordinating activity across its vast, distributed body. Fungi also demonstrate what can only be called decision-making behavior. When growing through an environment, fungal networks constantly make choices about where to extend their growth, what obstacles to go around, and what resources to prioritize. These decisions often show remarkable sophistication. A fungus might grow around a toxic area in soil, remembering its location and consistently avoiding it in future growth. It might allocate more resources to parts of its network that are encountering rich food sources while reducing investment in less productive areas. Perhaps most remarkably, fungi seem capable of learning and memory. In laboratory experiments, slime molds, which, despite their name, are actually fungus-like organisms, have been shown to solve mazes, find the shortest path between food sources, and even anticipate regular changes in their environment. When faced with a pattern of environmental changes, say, a dry period that occurs at regular intervals, they can learn to prepare for these changes, altering their behavior before the challenging conditions actually arrive. This learning appears to happen without any centralized processing system. Unlike animals, fungi don't have brains or even nerve cells. Instead, their intelligence seems to emerge from the collective behavior of their network, a kind of distributed cognition that arises from simple interactions between many individual parts. It's like a cellular democracy, where decisions emerge from the accumulated choices of countless tiny components working together. The communication extends beyond individual fungal networks to interactions between different species. Fungi can recognize and respond to the chemical signals of their plant partners, adjusting their behavior based on the needs and the health of their hosts. Some fungi can even distinguish between different individual plants of the same species, showing preferential treatment to partners that provide better resources or more reliable cooperation. There's also evidence of what might be called fungal social behavior. Related fungi often grow in coordinated patterns, avoiding direct competition with their siblings while collaborating to exploit resources more efficiently. Different fungal species sometimes form cooperative alliances, dividing up environmental niches in ways that benefit all parties. And some fungi engage in what can only be described as warfare, releasing chemical weapons to attack competitors or defend their territory. One of the most intriguing aspects of fungal communication is its potential role in ecosystem-wide information networks. Some scientists hypothesize that mycorrhizal networks might serve as a kind of forest internet, carrying information not just between fungi and their immediate plant partners, but across entire ecosystems. Chemical signals warning of insect attacks, seasonal changes, or environmental stresses might propagate through these networks, helping coordinate responses across vast areas of forest. As we drift towards sleep, there's something wonderfully comforting about imagining this hidden conversation happening all around us. While we rest, fungal networks continue their patient dialogue, chemical whispers and electrical murmurs flowing through the darkness below our feet. They're sharing information, making decisions, learning from experience, all without fanfare or recognition. Just the quiet intelligence of life figuring out how to survive and thrive in an endlessly complex world. It's a reminder that consciousness and communication might be far more widespread than we imagine, flowing through forms of life that operate on completely different principles from our own. In the fungal world, intelligence is distributed, decisions emerge from collective action, and communication happens in languages of chemistry and electricity that we're only just beginning to understand. Now, let's take a gentle wander into our own story with fungi, because humans and these mysterious organisms have been dancing together for far longer than most of us realize. It's a relationship that's been both intimate and largely invisible, woven through our food, our medicine, our folklore, and even our dreams. In many ways, human civilization as we know it simply wouldn't exist without fungi, though we've spent most of our history barely noticing our fungal partners and occasionally being quite rude about them. Consider, if you will, your last meal. Unless you're very unusual in your eating habits, fungi were almost certainly involved in creating it, even if you didn't see a single mushroom on your plate. The bread you might have enjoyed was risen by yeasts, tiny single-celled fungi that eat sugars and burp out carbon dioxide and alcohol, creating the bubbles that make bread light and airy. If you had cheese, thank fungi again. Many cheeses depend on molds for their distinctive flavors and textures. That glass of wine or beer, fermented by fungi. Even the soy sauce in your kitchen cabinet owes its deep, complex flavor to fungal fermentation. This partnership between humans and fungi is wonderfully ancient. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans have been making fermented beverages for at least 9,000 years, possibly much longer. Our ancestors may not have understood what was happening when they left grape juice in containers and it turned into wine. but they certainly appreciated the results. They were collaborating with wild yeasts, invisible partners that transformed simple sugars into alcohol and developed flavors that no human chef could create alone. The relationship deepened as humans learned to cultivate and control these fungal allies. We domesticated yeasts just as we domesticated plants and animals, selecting strains that worked reliably, that produced flavors we enjoyed, that could be passed down from generation to generation. Some sourdough starters have been maintained by families for centuries. Ancient lineages of fungi that have been carefully tended through wars, migrations, and countless family meals. There's something beautifully intimate about this. Kitchens where the same fungal cultures have been quietly working alongside human families for longer than anyone can remember. But fungi haven't just been our culinary partners, they've also been our healers, though we didn't always know it. Traditional medicine systems around the world have long recognized the therapeutic properties of certain mushrooms and molds. Chinese medicine has used fungi like reishi and cordyceps for thousands of years, believing them to enhance vitality and longevity. Indigenous peoples, in many parts of the world, developed sophisticated knowledge of which fungi could heal and which could harm, passing this wisdom down through generations of careful observation and experimentation. The most famous chapter in this medicinal story begins with a bit of accidental messiness in a London laboratory in 1928. Alexander Fleming, returning from vacation, noticed that a mold had contaminated one of his bacterial cultures, but instead of simply throwing away the ruined dish, he observed something remarkable. The bacteria around the mold had died. That mold was penicillium, and Fleming's observation led to the development of penicillin, the first true antibiotic. It's estimated that penicillin and the antibiotics that followed have saved hundreds of millions of lives, turning infections that were once death sentences into minor inconveniences. What's particularly wonderful about this story is that the mold wasn't trying to help humans. Penicillium produces its antibiotic compounds to protect itself from bacterial competitors in its natural environment. Humans simply learned to harness this ancient chemical warfare for our own benefit. It's a reminder that nature is full of solutions to problems we didn't even know we had, waiting quietly for us to notice them. The cultural relationship between humans and fungi is equally rich and complex. Mushrooms have appeared in folklore and fairy tales across cultures, often associated with magic, mystery, and transformation. Fairy rings, those perfect circles of mushrooms that sometimes appear in grasslands, were once believed to mark places where fairies danced or where the veil between worlds was thin. The truth, as we now know, is no less magical. These rings mark the expanding edge of underground fungal networks, growing outward year after year in perfect circles as they exhaust the nutrients at their center. Some fungi have shaped human consciousness quite literally. Certain mushrooms contain compounds that produce profound alterations in perception and thought, and these have been used in religious and spiritual contexts for thousands of years. Indigenous cultures from Siberia to Central America developed elaborate ceremonial traditions around these fungi, viewing them as teachers or doorways to other realms of experience. While these practices remain controversial and legally complex in modern societies, there's growing scientific interest in the therapeutic potential of these compounds for treating depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions. But our relationship with fungi hasn't always been harmonious. Some fungi cause diseases in humans, from minor skin infections to serious systemic illnesses. Others attack our crops, sometimes with devastating consequences. The Irish potato famine of the 1840s was caused by a fungal-like organism that destroyed potato harvests, leading to mass starvation and emigration. Wheat rust and other fungal diseases continue to threaten food security around the world, though plant breeders work constantly to develop resistant varieties. There's also the matter of poisonous mushrooms, which have made many people justifiably cautious about wild fungi. Some mushrooms contain toxins that can cause severe illness or death, and distinguishing edible species from dangerous ones requires expertise that takes years to develop. This has created a curious cultural divide. While some societies have strong traditions of mushroom foraging and consumption, others view all wild mushrooms with deep suspicion. Perhaps most remarkably, our understanding of fungi's role in the world has undergone a dramatic transformation in recent decades. For most of human history, fungi were seen as simple decomposers, the things that made food go bad or would rot away. We had no idea of their sophisticated communication networks, their crucial partnerships with plants, or their role as ecosystem engineers. It's only in the last few generations that we've begun to appreciate fungi as complex, intelligent organisms that are essential to life on Earth. This shift in perspective is changing how we think about conservation, agriculture, and even medicine. Scientists are exploring how fungal networks might help forests adapt to climate change, how mycorrhizal partnerships could make agriculture more sustainable, and how the unique chemistry of fungi might yield new medicines and materials. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you'll pause to appreciate the quiet presence of fungi in your own life. The yeasts that helped make your daily bread, the beneficial microbes that live peacefully in and on your body, the vast network spreading beneath the soil outside your window. We are, in so many ways, part of the fungal world, participants in partnerships and relationships that stretch back to the very beginnings of life on land. It's a connection that speaks to something deep about how life works, not through competition and isolation, but through cooperation and mutual dependence. In learning to work with fungi, humans have discovered some of our most important technologies and medicines. And perhaps, as we continue to understand these remarkable organisms, we'll find even more ways to live as respectful partners in the ancient web of relationships that fungi have been weaving for billions of years. Now here's where things get truly remarkable, in a way that might surprise you. When you think of the largest living thing on Earth, what comes to mind? A blue whale, perhaps, magnificent as it glides through the ocean. Maybe a giant sequoia, those cathedral trees that make you feel wonderfully small. Well, you might want to sit down for this one, or rather stay lying down, since you're hopefully already getting cozy, because the largest living organisms on our planet are actually fungi, and they're so vast that it's hard to believe they've been hiding in plain sight. Let's take a gentle wander into the Malheur National Forest in eastern Oregon. It looks like a perfectly ordinary forest, the kind of place you might go for a peaceful hike. The trees are lovely, the air is fresh, birds call from the canopy above. But underneath your feet, spreading invisibly through the soil and connecting to nearly every tree you can see, lives a single organism that covers 2,385 acres. That's roughly the size of 1,600 football fields, stretching across forest and meadow in an underground empire that most visitors never suspect exists. This hidden giant is a honey mushroom. Armillaria ostoi. Though calling it a mushroom is a bit like calling an iceberg an ice cube. The actual mushrooms, those golden, honey-colored caps that occasionally appear, are just the tiniest visible portions of this enormous organism. The real creature is the mycelium, those thread-like networks we've been getting to know. And in this case, they've been quietly expanding through the forest for an estimated 2,400 to 8,650 years. This fungus may have been growing when the pyramids were being built, when ancient civilizations rose and fell, patiently expanding its reach through centuries of human history. The Oregon giant isn't alone in its magnificent scale. There's another Armillaria colony in Michigan that covers about 1,500 acres and maybe even older. Scientists are discovering enormous fungi in forests around the world, each one a hidden titan quietly going about its business beneath our feet. What makes these discoveries particularly fascinating is how they happened. For decades, foresters in Oregon noticed something puzzling. Trees were dying in a curious pattern, not randomly but in slowly expanding circles. Scientists eventually realized that all these dying trees were connected by the same fungal network, and that what they'd been observing wasn't separate incidents, but the feeding behavior of a single, impossibly large organism. Armillaria is what scientists call a parasitic fungus, though that makes it sound more sinister than it really is. It feeds on living trees, but is also an accomplished decomposer, and it can switch between these lifestyles as opportunities arise. It's remarkably adaptable, not particularly fussy about the details as long as it can make a living in the forest. The challenge with measuring these fungal giants is that they don't exactly cooperate with scientific study. You can't simply walk up with a tape measure and ask for their dimensions. Instead, scientists use DNA testing, taking samples from mushrooms and mycelium across vast areas and checking whether they're all genetically identical. It's like doing a paternity test for an organism that might be larger than your hometown. These discoveries raise some wonderfully philosophical questions about what exactly makes something alive when we're talking about an organism this large and this old. The Oregon fungus doesn't have a brain or a heart, doesn't breathe in any way we'd recognize. Parts of it might die while other parts keep growing. It might go decades without producing any visible mushrooms, lying dormant through droughts or harsh winters. Is it one organism or millions? What constitutes its body when that body spans thousands of acres? The more we learn about these fungal giants, the more they challenge our basic assumptions about life itself. They make us reconsider what it means to be an individual, how we define the boundaries between one living thing and another. A colony of Armillaria might be physically connected across vast distances, but different parts of it can behave independently, responding to local conditions without necessarily coordinating with distant regions. There's something wonderfully humbling about these discoveries. For all our human achievements in building cities and skyscrapers, we're still dwarfed by organisms that have been quietly expanding their territories for millennia without anyone noticing. The largest human structures are impressive for decades or centuries. These fungi have been growing steadily since before written history began. They're proof that patience and persistence can create something truly monumental. And these aren't the only fungal record holders. There are puffball fungi that can grow to remarkable sizes. Some specimens have been found weighing over 40 pounds and measuring nearly 5 feet across. Imagine encountering one of those in your garden walk. Then there are the bracket fungi that can live for decades on the same tree. adding layer upon layer of growth until they become substantial woody structures that can weigh hundreds of pounds. Some of these bracket fungi have growth rings like trees, allowing scientists to read their life stories in concentric circles of fungal tissue. They're living libraries, storing decades of environmental history in their slow-growing bodies, recording wet years and dry years, good seasons and difficult ones, all while quietly continuing their patient work of decomposition. As you settle deeper into rest, there's something comforting about knowing that some of the largest, oldest living things on Earth are quietly going about their business in forests around the world. While we hurry through our brief human lives, these ancient networks continue their patient work, connecting trees, recycling nutrients, and slowly expanding their underground territories. They're proof that sometimes the most impressive things in life are also the most invisible, and that true longevity comes not from rushing towards some goal, but from simply persisting, growing steadily, one thread at a time. But now, let's take a gentle step forward into the future that fungi are quietly helping us build. Because while we've been discovering the ancient wisdom of these remarkable organisms, scientists and innovators around the world have been asking a wonderfully practical question. If fungi can do all these extraordinary things naturally, what might we learn from them? What problems might they help us solve? The answers emerging from laboratories and research centers are as surprising as they are hopeful. Let's wander into some of the most intriguing possibilities, starting with something that sounds like science fiction, but is actually happening in labs right now: growing buildings from fungi. Companies are developing construction materials made from mycelium, those thread-like fungal networks we've been getting to know. These living materials can be grown in molds, shaped into bricks or panels, then dried to create structures that are strong, lightweight, fire-resistant, and completely biodegradable. Imagine walls that grew rather than being built, houses that could return to the earth when their time is done, architecture that partners with biology rather than fighting against it. The process is surprisingly elegant. Scientists feed agricultural waste, corn stalks, wood chips, rice hulls to fungal mycelium, which digests the material and grows into any shape the researchers provide. After a few weeks, they have living building blocks that can be dried and used like conventional materials, except these building blocks once pulsed with life and still carry the memory of growth in their cellular structure. Some companies are already using mycelium-based materials for packaging, insulation, and even fashion accessories. It's the beginning of what some call the mycelium revolution, a shift toward materials that grow rather than being manufactured. Then there's the fascinating world of fungal medicine, which extends far beyond the antibiotics we discovered decades ago. Researchers are finding that many mushrooms contain compounds that seem almost tailor-made for human health challenges. Reishi mushrooms appear to support immune function and may help with stress. Lion's mane mushrooms contain compounds that could support brain health and possibly even help repair damaged neurons. Turkey tail mushrooms are being studied for their potential in cancer treatment, their complex polysaccharides showing promise in supporting the body's natural defenses. What's particularly exciting is that we're likely just scratching the surface. Scientists estimate that there may be 2.2 to 3.8 million fungal species on Earth, but we've only formally described about 150,000 of them. That means there are millions of fungi we haven't even met yet, each one a potential source of new medicines, materials, or biological solutions to problems we're still trying to solve with old technologies. Some researchers are exploring fungi's potential in environmental remediation, using their natural abilities to clean up pollution and restore damaged ecosystems. Certain fungi can break down toxic chemicals, absorb heavy metals from soil, and even digest petroleum products. There are experiments using fungi to clean up oil spills, to rehabilitate contaminated land, and to filter pollutants from water. It's like having an army of microscopic janitors that work for free and actually enjoy cleaning up messes that would be expensive and difficult for humans to address. In agriculture, the rediscovery of mycorrhizal relationships is sparking what some call a soil renaissance. Farmers are learning to work with fungal networks rather than against them, reducing their dependence on chemical fertilizers by fostering the natural partnerships between crops and soil fungi. Some agricultural companies now sell mycorrhizal inoculants, essentially bags of beneficial fungi that farmers can add to their fields to restore the underground networks that support plant health. There's also growing interest in fungi's potential for sustainable food production. Several companies are developing meat alternatives made from fungal proteins, creating products that taste and feel like animal meat, but grow much more efficiently and with far less environmental impact. Other researchers are exploring fungi's ability to transform food waste into high-quality protein, using the natural recycling abilities of decomposer species to create nutritious food from materials that would otherwise go to landfills. Perhaps most intriguingly, scientists are beginning to explore fungi's potential as living computers. The electrical signals that flow through fungal networks, those same communication systems we learned about earlier, can be interpreted and potentially harnessed for information processing. Some researchers have successfully used slime molds to solve complex HR optimization problems, like finding the most efficient routes through transportation networks. It's early days yet, but there's a fascinating possibility that biological computers made from fungi might someday complement or even replace some silicon-based systems. The field of biomimicry, learning from nature to solve human problems, is finding endless inspiration in fungal innovations. Engineers are studying how fungal networks distribute resources efficiently to design better communication and transportation systems. Materials scientists are learning from the way fungi build their cellular structures to create stronger, lighter human-made materials. Computer scientists are exploring how fungal networks process and share information to develop more resilient communication networks. But perhaps the most important possibility is simpler and more profound. That learning about fungi might change how we think about life itself, about cooperation and competition, about intelligence and communication, about our place in the web of relationships that connects all living things. As we understand more about how fungi create networks of mutual support, how they solve problems through collective intelligence, how they build resilient systems that persist across centuries, we might find new ways to organize our own societies and technologies. There's something wonderfully hopeful about this fungal future. The idea that some of our biggest challenges might be solved not through new inventions, but through ancient partnerships. Not by fighting against nature, but by learning to work with organisms that have been perfecting their techniques for hundreds of millions of years. The solutions we need may already exist, growing quietly in the soil beneath our feet, waiting for us to notice them, to understand them, to invite them into collaboration. As we settle into the final moments of our journey through the fungal world, There's comfort in knowing that while we sleep, researchers around the world continue to unlock the secrets of these remarkable organisms. Each discovery opens new possibilities, new partnerships, new ways of thinking about what it means to live sustainably on a planet that fungi have been quietly managing for longer than we can truly comprehend. And so, we arrive at the end of our gentle expedition through the hidden kingdom of fungi. Though perhaps end isn't quite the right word. Because fungi, as we've discovered, don't really believe in endings, only transformations, only the patient recycling of matter and energy from one form into another. We've wandered together through ancient origins and underground networks, through decomposition and communication, through partnerships with plants and humans, and glimpsed the future they might help us build. Through it all, one truth has emerged. Fungi are not just inhabitants of our world. They are its quiet architects, its living internet, its memory. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, the fungal world continues its ancient work. Mycorrhizal networks hum beneath forests around the globe. Spores drift on gentle breezes. In darkness and light, the hidden kingdom persists in its patient essential work, asking for so little, but offering everything. And if you found any peace in this quiet expedition, if the wonders of these hidden networks brought you calm, or the questions helped you drift gently into your dreams, we'd be honored if you follow us for more journeys through science in the future. Sleep well, fellow traveler, knowing that you rest in a world woven together by fungal threads. May your dreams be as quietly transformative as mycelium in the soil. Thanks for joining us here at Sleep Science.